Welcome again to Sid Caudle. Sid, lots of eclectic, there's a good word, bag today for us to discuss. But I tell you what, we're not going to let Sir Keir off the hook because even his own side now are getting fed up. It's what can I call it? Sid, double talk, and this is coming out with all the what we're going to do for our armed forces, the mythical 12 submarines shared between ourselves, the States, and Australia. Nothing's there, Sid. It's just the future. What if? He's been sussed.
Yeah, absolutely. See, right from the beginning of Starmer becoming Prime Minister, what we've had is uncertainty, statements made, but it's been unclear exactly what he's doing. And of course, the Labour Party was elected on a manifesto, and the manifesto said very clearly there'll be no tax increases other than 9 billion, which will go on. They did announce that they were going to put VAT on school fees. They announced that they were going to tax non-DOMs. They did announce that, but the total came to about 9 billion. And they actually said in the manifesto that there will be no other tax rises. Any other income that's required will come from existing budgets. That's what the manifesto said. And then as soon as they're elected, it's like, oh no, we're going to have to raise taxes. And there's a 22 billion black hole we didn't know about. Nonsense. I mean, the Institute for Fiscal Studies said they do perfectly well the situation of the government's finances. They're just trying to blame the Conservatives for what they did. Now that's the economic background. So if we then come to defence, you see, on defence, they're announcing 15 billion on new warheads. Now these are nuclear warheads, and it was already announced that there's going to be 48 billion spent on renewing Trident. Now we said that's the wrong approach. The right approach is to have a missile shield. Now this is what Trump has announced in America, and of course it's what's applying in Israel, and it's also applying in Ukraine because they've been shooting down Russian missiles. Britain's capability of shooting down missiles is pathetic. But that's what we should be spending our money on. I mean, Trump said, oh, Russia's a threat. Russia's a threat. We've got to prepare for Russia. Well, the way to prepare for Russia is to have the capability of shooting down any missiles that Russia might fire at this country. And we're not doing what we need to do on defence.
I agree. There's something a bit subtle about everything at the moment, of course, when we talk about AI. Now, this has been on the military field actually for quite a while. They are aware and were aware of what was going to happen. And we've seen from what's happened with Marks and Spencer, we've seen what's happened with the blackout in Spain. All these are warning signs about the future, and maybe it doesn't depend on how many old-fashioned, inverted commas, nuclear warheads you've got for submarines. More is depending on what's happening in Wiltshire. Hidden away there's a centre that is really on top of things. And actually, this last week, one of the newspapers was given permission to go in there and just see, not everything, but so much as to say, wow, aren't we very cunning and clever? And we are. There's a bunker there that has massive screens. It's like Cape Canaveral on steroids. And it shows, for instance, HMS Prince of Wales. We've got two massive aircraft carriers, cost a fortune, billions. They're going to the Far East to rattle things up there near Taiwan for obvious reasons with China there, and them wanting to take Taiwan. But they have to go through the Red Sea. Well, they don't have to, they can go around the Cape. But the Red Sea is a very dangerous place with the Iran-funded Houthis, who have been given top weapons, by the way. It's not some mad military sectarian force. These are serious fighters. And an aircraft carrier, as you well know, Sid, is very vulnerable. and they've got to sail with lots of support ships round them to take out any torpedoes, etc. And the actual logistics of this are fascinating. And we are heading up cyber warfare with the top other nations, and you have to keep up with this. It's a very dangerous game. But let me tell you, the police force actually are doing that in the United Kingdom. When you hear we've headed off at the pass a certain Islamic group that were about to blow up the Israeli embassy in London, that's all been done by AI computers putting things together which the human mind couldn't do in the time available to stop an act like this. We're well up there, so we've got to be congratulatory to our armed forces. But as you rightly said, we've not got to be mean and come out with airy-fairy stories. We're down on our military. We couldn't even fill Wembley, just a bit over half. 60-odd thousand, that's all we've got now. Soldiers on the ground. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. But you see, we need modern weapons. You see, Israel's got three types of weapons that can intercept rockets that are fired at them. You know, which we are developing laser weapons. If we got laser weapons in place, that the laser weapons can fire at any missile that comes our way and basically destroy it in the air, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as the Israeli system, the Iron Dome. But we need that sort of system, and that's what we should be spending money on. But Keir Starmer's not doing that. You see, so we're going down the wrong path. What you've said is great. It's very useful. By the way, after Trump bombed all the Houthis like crazy, they made peace and they said, no, we won't attack any more shipping. So they've stopped attacking shipping in the Red Sea. They're still firing weapons at Israel. They basically said, we've not made peace with Israel, but we have made peace with the United States, and we're not going to attack any more international shipping. They've said that as part of the peace agreement, and they have stopped attacking international shipping.
Well, encouraging. Some good news at last. We mentioned China. Now, China is a severe threat to many countries. And one of the ways they're getting at the world is to supply everything the West needs, whether it be dolls for our children or whether it be sophisticated chips for our computers. But one of the things that has come to light is solar panels. Yeah, everybody wants a solar panel. But we're finding out in many places, and it happened in Britain and America at the same time, there are kill switches being put in these solar panels, and with the clever electronics that comes with them, whereby they can be stopped working in in zones, and they put them in the inverters of these solar panels. And China, with at least half of the solar panels they produce, have got kill switches in. They can switch us off, Sid. Now, we have stopped receiving anything from China that has not been through the hoop, and we can be sure that we've not got any of these suspect panels. But goodness me, this is one way that the Chinese are getting at the West.
Well, yes, and this government is completely naive when it comes to this sort of thing. I mean, they think that China's a wonderful country. I mean, you have to understand, of course, that we now have a socialist government, and China has a socialist government. It's just a little bit more extreme than ours. That's all. But they basically have the same attitude towards economics and the same attitude towards politics. And the attitude of this government is that we should be friends with China. They don't see China as an enemy, but certainly anyone that's sensible realizes that China's whole approach is one world government. I mean, they've got an incredible amount of influence in the World Health Organization, and and the United Nations and most international bodies. They've been spending enormous amounts of money in Africa trying to make Africa dependent on China for all their economics. And it's the same throughout the world. So they've certainly got an agenda of world domination. But our government's got nowhere near getting to grips with that. Nowhere near.
Right, you have been warned. Mr. Starmer, are you listening? Probably not.
Mm.
Something else has come out about the aforementioned gentleman, and it's to do with Chagos Islands and the gift he has made. Who were the first people to congratulate him? The Chinese. It was a fantastic decision, they said. Are we stupid, Sid, not to see what is happening?
Well, of course we're stupid. I mean, the thing is, people have to understand is that the Chagos Islands are 1,000 miles from Mauritius. I mean, you think that the Chagos Islands were somehow right next to Mauritius or even part of the group of islands or something, and we were occupying this group of islands that really belonged to Mauritius. They don't belong to Mauritius. They've never belonged to Mauritius. Oh, this is what this is again is socialism trying to attack the colonial past of Great Britain. It's actually, believe it or not, in this new treaty we've made. It actually talks about remedying the rights of our colonial past. It's in the treaty. I mean, it's utter nonsense. It's we've got absolute. You see, I think the thing that's most important in this is that the people who inhabit the Chagos Islands want to be part of Britain. They don't want to be part of Mauritius. And any decision should be taken on the basis of self-determination. The people that live there should have the final say. Now, while we're talking about this, it should be the same, of course, for Greenland. At the end of the day, Greenland is under Denmark, but Greenland says we don't want to be under Denmark anymore. We want to be independent. But when they had their last election, the candidate who said we want to be linked to the United States only got about 1% of the vote. So at the end of the day, even though Trump might say, I want Greenland, the final decision has to be taken with the inhabitants of Greenland. It should be the same across the world. It should be the same in the Falklands. I mean, Malay says, I want the Falklands. Okay, well, the final decision has to be taken with the people that live there. It shouldn't be a matter of, who's got the most power and who's got the best armed forces. No, I'm sorry.
Sid, sticking with socialism, let's go to Brighton. Well, a bit of a history there. The Greens, etc. Left wing, of course. And it's becoming like the Sopranos. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we've got a certain amount of bin men or hygienic cleansing or whatever they like to call themselves these days. They're running their own mafia. There's a group of them there that control collections, and some collections are now made every 8 weeks, would you believe? Which is just not on. Brighton's on the south coast, warmer than most parts of Britain. You cannot leave things outside in a bin that long. And they're slashing tyres for their own people, the management, if they disagree with what the unions are saying. Somebody now is trying to get to grips with it. This cannot go on. We've got to sort it out. There's cover-ups. They're even called insurgents among the locals in the knowledge of what is going on there. It's, this is socialism gone mad. It's back to Arthur Scargill.
Well, you have to understand that Brighton Council is controlled by the Green Party. And, the Green Party are more left-wing than the Labour Party. I mean, one of their policies in the last manifesto was a wealth tax. So everyone has to pay 1% of their total wealth each year to the government. It's just like crazy. I mean, even the Labour Party wasn't that extreme. And by the way, France tried that and it didn't work and they quickly cancelled it. I mean, but it's their whole attitude is soak the rich, attack the rich, and and they don't realise that unless business is creating wealth, there is no money for anybody else. And if you just attack the rich, then they all end up going abroad, and there's a lot less money for this country. That's happening anyway with this government, by the way. I mean, because there's all this attack on non-doms. People don't realise that actually a lot of these non-doms, are running businesses here and employing a lot of people. And if you just attack them and send them all abroad, you don't create wealth and get loads of income. You actually end up getting a lot less income. But yeah, what the Green Party are doing in Brighton is absolutely crazy. I mean, last week we talked about the whole green hoax, and the fact that it's the whole agenda is complete nonsense and proven to be completely false. But the Green Party are just sold on extreme socialism. That's the reality of it. And also, they're also sold, by the way, on extreme immorality. I mean, they're totally in favour of transsexualism. I mean, they're totally sold on that. They want to ban conversion therapy, which basically means prayer for anyone with unwanted same-sex attraction. They promote abortion. I mean, they're just the most extreme party that you can imagine.
And they come under a very nice looking cloak, of course, which especially takes the young people in. Talking about young people and socialism, let's talk about our young doctors. Not only have they got a massive pay rise when Labour came in, there was great rejoicing among the unions. I'm not surprised they got everything they wanted, demanded even. And we were straightforward about this, Sid, and got into trouble, easily done with me, by saying people are dying. Dare one say the word manslaughter? Lots of people died because of the doctor's strike last time. And they want another 30, well, 29 point something percent, 30% increase. They've only just had that. What is going on?
Well, you see, what tends to happen with unions, because is once you give something, then the union is then going to come back and demand more. And if one union is given exactly what they want, every other union is going to come along and say, okay, well, they got exactly what they want. We can get exactly what we want. And all their demands become more and more extreme. That's what happens. Now, what they should do, and what the government should have done, is to make any wage rise dependent on productivity improvements and introducing new computer systems or whatever, or reducing the manpower in order to improve productivity. So basically the cost to the exchequer is then mitigated by the fact that we're either now employing less staff, we're doing the whole system more efficiently, or something that's actually working better, so that they've actually earned the pay rise. Now that's what any sensible government would do. And I believe the Conservative government were basically trying to work towards that process. So basically saying, okay, yeah, you can have a wage rise, but we've got to have productivity improvements. You can't just have it for nothing. But of course, the Labour Party came in and they said, oh yeah, we'll give you whatever you want. And that's disastrous. It's a disastrous approach. And they basically tried to blame the Conservatives for them giving the unions exactly what they wanted. But it wasn't a blame to the Conservatives at all. It was their approach. It was their decision. And their decision was frankly terrible.
It has to be said, though, in certain union cases, you are wasting your time talking. I'm thinking unions surrounding our rail system. I mean, we've got these trains that are 10 years out of date already. They were made 10 years ago. Can't even get them into the railway stations because we demand a guard. But look, if you have a guard, it's actually less safe because all the electronic and other safeguards are far more secure than a guard. No, we insist on having a guard. Quite frankly, Sid, on southern region, the commuters have been, well, they've been in hell for years and years and years, standing up, no toilets, dirty trains, and always going on strike. And this is an extreme union that even the Labour Party can't seem to do anything with.
I have to say that I mean the whole railway system in the UK now is way better than it was when we had British Rail. back in the 1970s. I mean, that was just a complete disaster because I used to use British Rail, and the trains were just awful. Everything was late, and the cost was just no comparison. The train system that we have where I live in Hitchin is, gets to the centre of London every 15 minutes, and they're very good trains. There's 12 carriages each train, and the time I travel, they're never overcrowded. But even when I have travelled at peak times, they've not been particularly overcrowded either. So I mean, but it's what this government is now saying is that, oh, we're going to have to take over rail franchises. I mean, they've taken over the franchise for Western Railways, and already there's reports that since they've taken over, things have got worse. I mean, they took over with the promise, oh, we'll sort it out. The Tories have this and the Tories have done that, and and it's like, we'll improve it, we'll make the trains run on time, we'll do everything fantastically. They've taken it over, and the commuters are already saying now it's worse than it was before. And frankly, that'll be the same right across the board. If they take over franchises, they won't run better, they'll run worse.
Let's go to troubles over the Atlantic, although they mirror the stuff in Britain, of course. And Trump is still determining one way or the other to get his way over tariffs. Various lower courts, one must add, have tried it on and failed, as long as the appeal goes ahead and the decision towards Trump goes ahead. But I can't see any other way out of it. But there you got a system whereby both sides of the pond are in the same benefit. The law seems to be in charge of everything these days. We're hiding behind the law, Sid.
Yeah, okay, but when it comes to tariffs, you see, the thing people need to understand over tariffs is that tariffs are only necessary when there's a trade imbalance. If there's a trade balance, then you can have free trade and everything works fine. But if you have free trade and you've got a big trade imbalance, then you may well need tariffs in order to bring it back to balance. And that's what Trump is doing, because Trump has the power to do it. So he's had a look at countries right across the world and said, all these countries, including countries like Mexico and China and the European Union, have all been milking the United States. They've been charging us far more for goods that are imported to them than goods that are imported to the United States. And we've got massive trade imbalances, and we've got to put this right. So that's what Trump is saying, and that's what he's doing. He hasn't got a trade imbalance with the UK. With the UK, we're virtually in balance, which is why he's quite happy to have a trade agreement with us and have lower tariffs, which, by the way, aren't actually lower tariffs, because he put them up to 25% and then put them back down to 10%. But before this government came in, they were 3.4%. So we've actually got an increase in tariffs across the board, which they've now tried to make out is a great improvement. It's only a great improvement because it's not 25% as he originally announced. It's not an improvement on what we had before. But Trump is good at doing things like that, masking an increase in tariffs as a great reduction. And this government's absolutely hopeless. But the main issue for me is our trade with the European Union, because we've got a 90 billion trade deficit with the European Union. And instead of doing what they should do, which is imposing tariffs on EU goods, which any sensible government would, because if we impose tariffs on EU goods, we'd be a lot better off, and we'd be able to bring ourselves back to balance in trade. Instead of that, it's like, well, we've got to have a free trade agreement. We have to have a free trade agreement at all costs. I mean, we're willing to sacrifice Britain's fishermen for free trade agreement, and it's just utter nonsense. The whole thing is complete nonsense. It's not economic sense. It's what it is. It's globalism, because Keir Starmer is a globalist, and he's more interested in supporting global institutions than he is on actually fighting for the benefits, what will benefit the UK. His new trade agreement with the EU doesn't benefit the UK. It's a disaster for the UK. It benefits the EU.
Which leads us on to another balmy subject, and that's not nice weather, but it involves the weather. Climate change that we wade into every now and again. Again, something is surfacing that is rather nasty. It appears when these scientists, many of them, who stand up and say, oh, that's the warmest day since 1825 or whatever, this confirms global warming. It appears to be completely wrong. And it's wrong because of the mini weather stations that are all over the United Kingdom. And sources from our weather come from these little stations. They've got wind calculators in there. They've got a barometer, all sorts of things, and rain, fall, and temperature. And these are accessed every day of the week to see who's been the coldest and who's been the warmest, and to draw unscientific conclusions from all this. Now, apparently, they are graded 1 to 5. And you, as a serious meteorologist, can only accept grade 1 and 2. 4 and 5 are rubbish, and you've got half rubbish in between. Now, what do I mean? It depends on where they're located. If you're going to put a mini weather station in the centre of a city, you're going to get a lot of false readings because cement, concrete, bricks, mortar heat up like a night storage heater during the day. Then they emit it during the late afternoon and evening. You get lots of false readings because of that, compared with putting it in a field. But more sinister, if you wish, is a lot of them are on airports, even beside runways, would you believe? Where, of course, what comes out the back of a jet is very superheated air. And of course, that affects the readings of these weather stations. And 80% of the weather stations, Sid, in category 4 and 5, are giving false readings, and they are accepted by our weather forecasters. Now, there's something very sinister in all this. They want to go to any extent to prove false global warming.
Yes, but you see, the truth is that when they last took the temperature of the Atlantic Ocean, it was 1 degree cooler. And it was the same for the Pacific Ocean. That was 1 degree cooler. The truth is there is no reduction in ice on the Arctic Ocean. There's no reduction of ice in the Arctic on land. It comes and goes with the season, but overall, if you compare this year with last year, there is no reduction. And we've been told repeatedly by the BBC and by all those who support the climate hoax that ice is reducing, the levels of the oceans are rising, and it's a great threat to London. I mean, they actually said that if the polar ice cap melts, then the oceans will rise by 7 meters, and they only need to rise by 2 meters for London to be totally underwater. But it's not happened. All these threats are just, of the sea levels rising just haven't happened. And like you say, they can play games as much as they like with how they locate weather stations, but they can't alter the temperature of the Arctic, of the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and the temperature of the Arctic. They can't do that. So that's what we need to look at. And when we look at that, we realize there is no global warming taking place. That's the reality of it. And the whole thing is a complete hoax. And by the way, if people didn't watch last week's, I should just say very quickly, the whole environment movement started with Earth Day 1970. And Earth Day 1970, they said that by 1979, the Earth would be 5 degrees cooler. And by the year 2000, it would be 11 degrees cooler, and we'd have another ice age. That's what they were predicting when the environmental movement was launched It was only in 1988 that they shifted from global cooling to global warming. So, but nothing that they've ever predicted has ever come true. Nothing.
Well, somebody must gain from all this. And I'm going to ask you the $64,000 question. What's in it for those globalists, world leaders? What monetary value is it for pushing this agenda?
Well, the agenda's being pushed because they want to create a one world government. You see, you can't, if there was a climate problem, let's just pretend that we did have a man made climate problem, that if man stopped emitting carbon, then we could solve the problem of increased global warming. If just pretend that that was an issue, um, then you can't solve it by one country on its own. This country emits something like 1% of the world's carbon. So you can only solve it by international agreement, such as what they've done in Paris with the Paris Accord. We all have to agree to reduce carbon emissions. Now, what we said last week is that the truth is that carbon is actually good for the environment. When they do greenhouses in the winter, in order to grow plants in greenhouses, they actually pump them with carbon dioxide in order to get them to grow for plants to grow quicker. And NASA have said that over the last 10 years, the planet has greened significantly, and the amount of food being produced on the planet overall has gone up exponentially. That's the truth. So we haven't got a problem with carbon emissions. But if we did, then you couldn't solve them by one country on its own. That's why they've tried to create this climate hoax to create the need for a one world government. That's what's going on. And they're not just doing it with the climate, they're also doing it with the pandemic. So they're launching this pandemic. We now know that the pandemic was launched through a laboratory in Wuhan in China, and it was launched throughout the whole world. So they did that to create the need for world health. So they've now tried to create a pandemic treaty where the World Health Organization can override all national governments and make the decisions for all national governments. It's not gone through in their original form, thanks to Citizen Go, but there's still aspects to it which are unacceptable because the pandemic treaty is there. But it's they've also set up the World Economic Forum to try and make rules for how governments can tax throughout the whole world. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to introduce one world government.
Interesting stuff. Let's go for more interesting stuff. Can we learn a lesson from Harvard? Can we learn a lesson from the Donald and his treatment of Harvard University? That's the Oxford and Cambridge of America, Ivy League stuff. It's not a safe environment, apparently, according to Donald Trump, and he's tackling it. It's full of 7,000 students, overwhelmingly Chinese. Now, it appears that some of these are getting funding from CCP in China. So what they're doing with it? Well, there's a lot of violence on campus. There's a lot of woke on campus, of course. Non-cooperation to the authorities. They're too interested in DEI. The whole thing is turning students into what the Chinese and many woke amongst us want. And the Donald is not having any more of it. It's full investigation going on. Wants to start in Oxford and Cambridge over here, doesn't it?
Well, the first thing we should say is that all universities benefit from having overseas students because overseas students are normally charged the full whack. I mean, even though we now have loans and student fees and goodness knows what, which are very significant, they're still not as much as overseas students are charged. And of course, they have no loans, whatever, so they all come financed by the government. And like you say, there's a lot of students in Harvard that are financed by the Chinese government. Now, that's not a bad thing for Harvard, because as far as Harvard is concerned, it brings them in an enormous amount of income. Now, what Donald Trump is saying is, okay, you can get your income from China and whatever, you can run your courses as you like, but we're not going to finance you anymore. So you're not going to get any money anymore from the American taxpayer who has been putting an enormous amount of finance into it. Now, I think it's absolutely, totally right to say that. Absolutely right to say that. What it means for Harvard, frankly, I don't know because I don't know the details of their income. But I'm quite sure they will still get enormous amounts of income from other sources, even if they don't get income from the American government. So it doesn't mean that Harvard will close down. Now, what's happened recently is there's been all these protests in support of Hamas that have been in the campus and led by Islamic students at Harvard, and which have been absolutely vicious, frankly, and viciously anti-Semitic. And it's that aspect which, frankly, the authorities of Harvard should have clamped down on. They shouldn't have just allowed the students to riot in that academic institution. They should have basically said, I'm sorry, but these riots are not acceptable. Any students that engage in riots will be sent home. And they don't do that because, of course, they lose the income from those students. But the problem is that they're sacrificing the whole academic institution for it. And I don't agree that the same is going on in Oxford and Cambridge. What's going on in Harvard is terrible. We don't have the same rioting going on in Oxford and Cambridge.
We had a blackout, if you remember, a fortnight or so ago in Spain, made the headlines worldwide. Oh, is this what's going to happen to us? Well, it is, unless something's taken down or put up. But I tell you what, there's some nasties coming out the cupboard. And we said there was something behind this, and it appears to be the following. Dare one say it's extreme socialism, which we have certainly in Spain. It didn't work. Any infrastructure didn't work, including telephones, emergency services, everything was blacked out. Apparently, there is a suggestion, and I think it's more of a suggestion, that actually Spain brought this on by doing a test to see how much solar power, wind power, which Spain has oodles of, you can put in the system. It's not reliable power. It's either 100% or zero. So you've got to control it. And of course, Spain did half a job, got all the wind power and solar power, but didn't have a backup to control it. And it blew the system. Well, okay, we can see that, and let's tell them to put more batteries in that last longer than an hour and a half as a second line defense, so at least we won't lose communications next time. I doubt whether that will be done, but that's one easy answer. But other things are coming out. Corrupt political movements. Why is it corrupt? Well, for a start, it turns out that the government of Spain owned 25% of the main, what is called red network of electricity in Spain. Now, that is not healthy, certainly that big a percentage, but they do control it. They're getting money from it, and it gives them the right to appoint who's in charge, the CEO. Well, let me tell you who they put in, it appears. A lady who has little or no experience of high-level management, certainly nothing of the electrical type, and she's actually paid 6 times more than the Spanish Prime Minister, and he's paid enough, believe you me. That is typical jobs for the girls in this case, as opposed to jobs for the boys. Now, enquiries are going along, but a lot is hidden in all this scenario. As usual, corruption, Sid, rises to the surface. Whatever type of corruption or power, in this case, literally power, political power, rises to the surface. There's something behind it, and it's always best to look at the headlines, then dig what's behind it. And we see what's behind it. It is extreme socialism, and trying to get away with it on the cheap. You can't do that. Infrastructure has to be top, top, top.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I mean, people have to understand, if they don't know, that Spain now has an extreme socialist government, and they've been adopting this idea of renewable energy to such an extreme level that they're now actually saying they've got 100% of all their energy is coming from renewable energy. And the result was these blackouts. Now, these blackouts are absolutely frightening. I mean, you'll know because you're among them, but for people that don't know, I mean, it basically meant your mobile phone wasn't working because there was no signal emission from the towers. So all communication stopped, as well as no electricity, no gas, no lights anywhere. I mean, it was for the period that the blackout lasted, it was absolutely frightening because because communication stopped completely. Now, in this program, at the beginning, we started by talking about defence and defence expenditure. But can you imagine? I mean, Keir Starmer is saying, Russia is a great danger and we have to be prepared to defend ourselves from Russia. But can you imagine if Russia was going to decide that they're going to launch nuclear weapons at the UK and they were able just to flick a switch to before they actually launched the weapon to have a complete blackout in the UK by flicking the switch, which was flicked in Spain and Portugal and those areas, and to stop all communication across the country. So we wouldn't be able to see the weapon coming. And the first we would know that the Russian fired nuclear weapons at us was when they landed on the country. Now, from a defence point of view, it's a matter of extreme concern. And the truth is that there is nothing wrong whatsoever with fossil fuel power. There's nothing wrong with gas-powered stations. There's nothing wrong with coal-powered stations. It's all nonsense. And we absolutely have to have fossil fuel powered stations, gas, coal-fired power stations in order to back up renewable energy. I've got nothing against solar power or wind power, whatever, but it needs to be backed up. It has to be backed up.
Meanwhile, we've got China and India just laughing us into where we're going to go. They're getting rich, we're getting poor. Our old people are suffering because they cannot afford the cost of electricity.
And the person who's got them sussed, of course, is Donald Trump. Who's come in with drill, baby, drill. We're not going to get rid of America. Joe Biden is saying, I'm going to cancel all fossil fuels. We're going to cancel all fracking. We're going to stop oil being produced in the United States. And he goes over to Saudi Arabia and says, please produce more oil because the price is going up because we've stopped producing it. So we need you to produce more oil, please, please. And Saudi Arabia says, oh, we've listened to what you've said and we've decided, no, we're not going to produce anymore. But Donald Trump says it's all utter nonsense because we've got plenty of oil in the US, and all we've got to do is just increase the amount of production in the US, and we'll have all we need, and that's what he's doing. He's got the right approach, and we ought to adopt the same approach. I mean, Starmer's we're going to cancel all oil production from the North Sea. I mean, it's just utter nonsense. It's Miliband, cancel, stop all fossil fuel production in the North Sea, close it all down. It's utter nonsense, socialist nonsense.
And dangerous nonsense. And let's look at two final stories, if we can. One is about Europe. 27 nations now belong to Europe. Used to be 28, as we know. Perhaps it's back to 28 the way things are going at the moment, but Europe has got some startling figures that are now leaping out. It's come from Austria, and they say, well, we speak German here, but there's a lot of people, immigrants, that don't. In fact, their own houses, when they are talking to their children, etc., they speak in their native original language. They don't speak in German. And the actual percentages are alarming, Sid. It's up to 1/3 of households in Austria alone, which is a wealthy country, that flies in the face of diversity. Oh, we're all in the same pot. It's good. We learn from each other. No, we don't. We go back to our enclaves, keep our language, and there's a real problem. And this is in every country, practically in Europe. Now, to his credit, one has to say Macron has seen the light regarding the great infusion, especially of Islamic immigration. And he's put his foot down. He's come out and said, no more. You're not wrecking our institutions. You're not wrecking our Frenchness. Oh, if this could happen in Britain, Sid, why isn't it?
Yeah, well, Macron's made a lot of decisions which we don't like at all, but it's interesting. He seems to have taken a very strong line on Islam, and he's taken a very strong line on immigration because France is basically allowing all the immigrants that turn up in France to be shipped over to the UK. I mean, they all arrive at Calais and it's like the French police are like, yeah, we'll help you into the boats. Would you like us to provide you with some more stable boats to help you get across to the United Kingdom? And that's France's attitude. But it's in the UK, we haven't got to grips with what's going on with Islam. You see, one thing people need to understand is this. The whole idea of the asylum system is to provide a safe haven for people that are fleeing wars or fleeing persecution. I have actually no problem whatsoever with people from Ukraine that are fleeing the war in Ukraine coming and landing in the United Kingdom as a safe haven if that's well, it's supposed to be the nearest country, but I've got no problem with them leaving Ukraine because of the war that's going on there and of the bombing and the killing. And I've got no problem with people leaving other war zones if they need to leave those war zones and go to a safe country. But it's actually Christians across the world that are being persecuted. I mean, Open Doors has said there's something like 350 million Christians in the world that are facing persecution. But the people coming over in small boats aren't Christians by and large. I mean, there's very, very few Christians coming over in small boats. They're almost all Muslims. So what's going on? These aren't people that are fleeing persecution. This is an agenda to transfer people from Islamic countries in the Middle East to the West. It's not just in this country, it's going on in the United States, it's going on across Europe, to make the United States and Europe, Western countries, more Islamic. That's what they're trying to do. So they're not fleeing persecution, it's agenda to make us more Islamic. Now, it seems as though France have cottoned on to this and basically said, no, we don't want to be more Islamic. I'm sorry, we don't accept it. In this country, it's totally different. In the last election, the Labour Party lost a lot of votes of Muslims who, in many cases, voted independent or voted Green. Now, that's a major concern to the Labour Party. So they're now falling over themselves to try and help the Islamic community. And they've talked about possibly introducing a new Islamic blasphemy law. Now, in 2008, Tony Blair decided to repeal the Christian blasphemy law. We had law on the statute book here that you couldn't blaspheme Christ, you couldn't blaspheme, anything that was hallowed to Christians. That was it. That was the Christian blasphemy law. That was repealed by Tony Blair in 2008. So just a matter of 17 years later, they're now saying we're going to introduce an Islamic blasphemy law. So we repeal the Christian one, but we introduce the Islamic one. And what's the Islamic blasphemy law going to say? It's going to be against the law to say anything that's offensive to Muslims. Really? So it's an offensive to Muslims to say that Jesus is the Son of God. So I'm not allowed to say that anymore, am I? I mean, it's just utterly, utterly perverse, the approach this government's taking to the whole situation. They don't know what's going on, and they're just making it worse, frankly.
Indeed, they are. Sid, we've got to finish and we'll finish on our usual footy note. Having said that, it's different. And I was surprised about this being besotted at times, not in recent years, with Manchester United. Um, what's going on there? How could a club that was so high come to so low? Well, something again is sneaked out of the woodwork, and I wonder if there's any thing behind this. I'm going to be accused of being extreme, I know, but I want your view on it. And it's happened with the kits and various things, and I wasn't aware of this, but it goes on in many clubs. They make a fortune from selling their kits, of course, and some of the prices are quite cruel, especially to fans that have been loyal for years. They can't afford to buy the latest shirt. The latest shirt comes out about 4 times a year now. Now, not only are the clubs content with making a fortune out of that, football socks, football shoes, you name it, they'll sell it to you as merchandise. But they even now making a fortune on pre-warm up on the football pitch. You've probably seen this. Before a match, the commentators, the pundits are giving it their all, and the team comes out to warm up, and they wear special training jackets, let's call them, and they're full of adverts. And again, before they go off, they often change into special tracksuits, again with more adverts on. So there's 3 or 4 different types of suits you can buy. But what happened in Manchester United, they became extremely woke about 3 or 4 years ago. They allowed all sorts of things into the club. And one of the things was LGBT. Now, one of the present team has come out against being made to wear a tracksuit full of LGBT stuff, rainbow bootlaces, which is another fashion with many clubs. And Mazraoui is a defender from Morocco that is now part of the first team in Man U. He refuses to wear any literally, suits of that basis. Islam coming to the rescue. That's a strange thing, isn't it?
Yes. Now, what people need to understand with Manchester United is that, and with a lot of football clubs in the UK, is that Manchester United was extremely well run for many, many years under Edwards. And they had no debt because they were a very prosperous club. And then the Glaziers came along from America, who were running sports in America and said, we can make a lot more money out of Manchester United than is being made at the current time. So we're going to buy the club and believe that we can increase its value significantly. When they bought the club, they actually used the club as collateral to buy it. So they ended up putting the club into massive debt. I mean, we were literally looking at 600 or 700 million of debt when they bought it for about 1 billion. And previously had no debt at all, which of course infuriated the fans because the fans were like, what's going on? Our club had no debt. Now our club has got millions of debt. And we were owned by a very nice British man. We're now owned by this American who just wants to make money. He's got no interest in the club as such, other than making money out of it. And of course, the Glazers succeeded in making a lot of money out of it. And they've sold it on now to Ineos and others. And when they sold it on, I believe it was something like 2.5 billion. So they made literally about 1.5 billion profit. And the way they made the profit is what you're describing. But all this came over from America. And it's not just affected one club, it's affected numerous clubs. On the woke side, by the way, I mean, you know, all this bending the knee was just ridiculous. I mean, really. But Crystal Palace have set us a wonderful example with a number of Christians there. And of course, their captain, Gahey, is a Christian. And he wrote on his woke armband he had to wear, I love Jesus. And then, of course, You know, it's like the Premier League are like, oh, we can't have this, we can't have this, we can't deface our beautiful woke armband. And Eze, you know, when he scored in the FA Cup final, I mean, he took off his shirt. It's like, I love Jesus. And they're looking to heaven. It's like, I honor Jesus, my Lord and Savior. You know, and it's like, it's wonderful that we have one club who's actually got the guts, you know, with a number of players. And by the way, the captain, Mark White, was also praying before the match in, you know, with all the players. So it's fantastic that we got one club that's willing to set us a wonderful example. And that club has won the FA Cup. They're going forward. And I just hope and pray that these players stay together because, you know, they're actually setting an example of what Christians can do. And it's not only about Muslims protesting. Christians are also protesting. Thank God.
Interesting times in many ways we're in, Sid. Again, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.